Hi, everyone. I'm Brian with the Scientist in Every Florida School program. And in this edition of Science Segments, I'm excited to connect you with a scientist to help you learn about ecosystem sciences. Who are you and what is your title?
Hi, I'm Praveen Subedi, and I am a postdoctoral research associate in the Soil and Water Sciences Department at the University of Florida.
What do you research and why is that important?
Here at the Environmental Microbiology Lab in the Soil and Water Sciences Department, I am currently working on understanding the effect of grassland management intensification on soil microbial processes that control greenhouse gas emissions. In addition to that, we are also doing some experimental manipulation of climate change to understand how sensitive are soil microbial processes like organic matter decomposition or production of soil extracellular enzymes to frequent changes in moisture as well as frequent changes in temperature. We are currently trying to understand the effect of elevated temperature on those processes, as well as how increasing the frequency of drying and wetting cycles in soils affect the production of greenhouse gas emissions in subtropical pastures.
Excellent. Can you briefly explain how changes in ecosystems result from climate change?
When we talk about climate, we should know that climate is an important factor that drives many ecosystem processes. And when we talk about climate change, we are focusing on the changes in both climatic variables like temperature, precipitation, and so forth. Now, when we think about climate change and their effect on ecosystem processes, I can think about how that change in climate affects changes in phenology, for example. So phenology is basically timing of life events. So the time of the year, for example, has a strong control over life events of many of the ecosystem participants. For example, if we think about the species, for example, migratory birds, so they have a specific time period that they migrate in a season. So trying to understand and trying to see how climate affects that phenology part of it kind of helps us understand how ecosystem changes with climate. For example, if we think about a migratory bird and its adaptation to climate change, so when the seasons generally kind of have lower winter time periods because of elevated temperature, it is likely that it would result in earlier migration for birds. And not all the ecosystem components respond to that climate change at the same rate. So there is a asynchronous adaptation. So for example, if a migratory bird already arrives at a location where there is no food available, because at that location, the food production or primary producers are not responding to that climate change at the same time when the birds arrive. So that affects the growth and survival of that migratory bird. So that could be one of the factors that is responsible for changing ecosystem processes. Another way how climate change can affect ecosystems could be changes in rains. For example, if we look into the climatic change effects on ecosystems, we see much of an effect on higher elevations. For example, tundra ecosystems are now being replaced by boreal forests because of higher or elevated temperature in that region. And because of that elevated temperature, boreal forests are now adapted to move northward and could encroach tundra ecosystems. And the species like Arctic foxes, stony owl that depend on those tundra ecosystems are in fact losing their habitat. So that is how it could also affect the existence of a species that is unique to a particular ecosystem. Another way could be a disruption in food web. For example, we can take polar bear as an example. And the intricate food relationships exist in an ecosystem, so that we have different trophic levels. And with polar bear, what happens is that the algae that grows on ice sheets are responsible to drive that food chain in that Arctic ecosystem. So when we have less ice caps, there is less algae growing on those ice caps, and that, in fact, in the long run, affects the growth and survival of polar bears. So that is another way how environment respond to that climate change. And another way could be increase or emergence of diseases and pests in these ecosystems. One example could be a mountain pine beetle outbreak in the boreal forest of British Columbia. So what happened is that generally those mountain pine bark beetle, the population of that bark beetle is controlled by low winter minimum temperature. So with climate change, what has happened in the last couple of decades is that the temperature has gone up. As a result, there is an elevation in low winter minimum temperature. So that has led to a higher survival of those pests. And as a result, there is growing number of disease, number of infecting populations of those mountain pine beetles. And we have seen examples of those beetle outbreaks that have led to a decimation of huge swaths of boreal forest in that region. So typically changes in those species or those components of ecosystems that have specific roles with respond to changing temperature or changing moisture could in fact lead to a cascading effect on how ecosystem responds, and that basically drives the change in ecosystem response to these perturbations in climate variables.
Thank you, Dr. Subedi, and thank you all so much for watching. We will see you next time.
Thank you, Brian, for providing me an opportunity to tell something about climate change effect.